The Whisper Network Part 2, Media Cover-Ups and Coordinated Future Attacks. This is a story coming from Bleeding Fool. It is about a comic book group that's a secret group on Facebook that uses their coordinated results and coordinated efforts to attack people in comic books that they don't like, to damage them, to make it difficult for them to work, and for them to just go on and live a normal life. Before we get into this article, and it is an interesting article, if you want to support my work, go to collegeofthedead.com. You can get a copy of College of the Dead Graduation Day. It's a 48-page full-color graphic novel. It's the second in an ongoing series, and we just started on Book 3, College of the Dead Spring Break. The script is written, and we are drawing. Moving right along, you can also support me at themermaids.com. Oops. And you can also support me at epicmermaids.com. Sign up for the email list for The Mermaids, a full-color epic mermaid fantasy, Game of Thrones with mermaids. It's really a fascinating series, and it's coming out soon. Now, back to the article. Since exposing the Whisper Network, tips and testimonials have flooded into the Bleeding Fool inbox. Bleeding Fool is a website that covers comics news. From all corners of the internet, it feels like a tectonic shift is happening, and we're still nowhere near done decontaminating the comics industry. Perhaps this series will be enough disinfecting light to foil these wicked plans. We'll see. Yeah, this is a very ambitious journalistic effort to expose a group of cancel culture people that just want to destroy other people. I mean, it's for personal gain, for fun, and out of jealousy. For this installment, I'm going to first present an untold history lesson of a massive crime that was initially reported and swiftly followed by a media cover-up. That, I think, a lot of people completely missed. Sometimes it's what the media doesn't report that makes a difference. Then we will go back inside the Secret Women of Comics Facebook group. That's where this Whisper Network meets and operates, where I will demonstrate why I think this popular DC Comics writer is the next target of the Whisper Network. And while we're in there, let's expose who the head honchos of the group are, shall we? But before we dive in, let me quickly recap and answer most of the common reaction to Part 1 of the Whisper Network. I did a video on that one as well, and there'll be a link, of course, to this article and to the original article. Is this thing even real? Oh, sure, the Whisper Network exists, but 99% of the time, we're not even talking about guys. Really? A few days after Part 1 dropped, writer Amy Chu casually confirmed the existence of the Whisper Network, which she dubbed the Arrogant Female Whisper Network on Twitter. Doesn't that sound like a great name for branded merchandise? Yes, it does. Okay, by the way, I'm a member of the Arrogant Female Whisper Network, which is neither run by Gail nor Alex, as he claims. And thanks for the new name. We are talking about enamel pins or stickers, and this is precisely why we've closed group for women, etc., etc. It's precisely why, because you don't want people to know what mischief that you're up to. Okay, so that's Amy Chu. Is she trying to convince her followers that this secret group for women, non-binary, and transgender pros that I've uncovered only exists to talk about how tired they are and share cat pictures 99% of the time? Well, as Alex the Campy has replied to those men who claim to be innocent of sexual assault, cute, but we don't believe you. Part 1 recap. In Part 1, we learned that 440-plus women who are either in the comic book industry or connected to it have a secret invite-only Facebook group where outsiders can only find and gain access to if they know where to look, who to ask, and can get approved by the top moderators. More on who those top moderators are later. Good. Members of this club include Zoe Quinn, Gail Simone, Max Visaggio, Heather Antos, Tamra Bonvillian, and many others that are regularly involved, implicated, or at least tertiary to more scandals than I could fit in 100 articles. And while the majority of the group's members have very mundane engagements or inactive accounts, a handful of them are very active. Interesting. After reading through Part 1, YouTuber Dan Fan, above here, humorously dubbed Alex the Campy the Regina George of the group, while also noticing how Rich Johnson of the comic-centric website Bleeding Cool frequently managed his site as more of a personal PR department for DeCampi, along with a writer named Stephanie Cook acting as sort of an apprentice to Alex. I think it's time we take a look at Ms. Cook. Yeah, there's some bad stuff about Ms. Cook, at least alleged here by Bill Willingham. Stephanie is a Toronto-based comic book writer and editor and is also a podcaster and critic. She founded various creator-focused websites like Creator Resources, Rogues Portal, and Creator Advisor, where she says she endeavors to give back to the comics industry that she loves. She says she does it because, quote, it can be extremely toxic and discouraging at times, but I really believe in the potential of what the comic industry can become. I want to help steer that ship towards progress, inclusivity, transparency, and to just generally be better. End quote. So she works with the comic book community as much as possible to help foster safer and more inclusive spaces for all. Got it? Now that we're all caught up, let me show you where I'm going with this. Felony charges and the disappearing news coverage. Uh-oh. Look at that moose hat. If a Hugo Award-nominated and Eisner Award-winning comics writer publicly accused someone else in the comic book industry of a felony crime, would you expect the comics media to report it? I would. The media sure made a big deal when the late, great Stan Lee accused his assistant of theft. But when the New York Times bestseller and legendary comic book pro Bill Willingham, the man responsible for the award-winning Vertigo comic book series Fables, and also creator of The Elementals, recently accused his assistant of embezzlement, and the story got memory hold and hidden. His assistant had been very eager to break into the business years earlier, and everything was presumably going well until he began to notice a lot of money had gone missing from his accounts. 3 years into her employment, Willingham became convinced that his assistant had betrayed him and that she'd embezzled in excess of $10,000 from his accounts. Willingham filed charges with the local authorities, and a criminal case was launched. That female assistant in question just happened to be one of the Whisper Network's rising stars, none other than Stephanie Cook. That's too bad. That is too bad, Stephanie Cook. Okay, apparently I'm blocked. Must hang around with the wrong people. In fact, Bill Willingham made the incident very public, releasing the news to the comic industry press with the following statement. Quote, it needs to be reported that during the 3 years she worked for me, Stephanie Cook embezzled and outright stole from me a total in excess of $10,000. That's a lot of money. That would be a felony. Unfortunately, I can't give you anything approaching an exact figure yet, as we're still uncovering the incidences of theft. That's from Bill Willingham from September 19th, 2015. This is an excerpt from his published statement. Recently, it's come to my attention that my former personal assistant, Stephanie Cook of Toronto, Ontario, has been seeking new work in the comic book field as a personal assistant. Specifically, I reference this. On September 4th, she tweeted, "Hey, comic pros, I need an assistant to help. Do you need an assistant to help you get stuff done? Check out what I can do for you." That tweet links to her blog site and her pitch. Comic pros, I know how badly you can be in need of help in your lives when you're focusing on putting out art and writings out there in the world. It can be hard to remember to do other things. That's where I come in. And it goes on from there, mentioning her past experience and examples of various services she offers. It needs to be reported that during the 3 years she worked for me, Stephanie Cook embezzled and outright stole from me. Not me. This is from Bill Willingham. I've never known her, met her, or worked with her. In a total of excess of $10,000. Unfortunately, I can't give you anything approaching an exact figure yet, and we're still uncovering the incidences of theft. Bill talks about police charges he's pressing and gives a case number for the proceedings and says that the reason he's taking it public is to prevent Cook from working in a similar fashion elsewhere. Doesn't want anyone else to get hurt. He then interviews himself in a Q&A article in which he asks himself with a list of allegations and fraudulent behavior against Cook, including withdrawing too much salary on his cards and then using additional amounts of money to fund her own projects, buy social media followers, and fly to Boston for a show, claiming someone else was paying. And he states that if she comes back to the USA from Canada, she may be arrested. Oh, that doesn't sound good. According to the folks I spoke with, Cook was well known by Willingham's friends and family, and everyone knew this had happened. They also told me that this was considered an open secret in the comic business. For For some reason, those I spoke with have been privately discussing Cook's embezzlement since 2015, but no one dared bring it up publicly. That's weird. For them, Cook's name had strangely become sort of a Voldemort who cannot be named. Perhaps because of her reputation and media connections, they're worried about some kind of backlash to their careers if they spoke out, even if everything they were saying was completely true. To hammer the point home even further, another source for this alleged crime spoke up. Uh-oh. One of the most respected women in comics appears to have had some knowledge of the theft case. Mimi Cruz, co-owner of renowned Utah-based Night Flight Comics, gave credence to Bill Willingham's 2015 public statements backing up his claims. The following was posted on her official blog, which she also linked to from her Twitter account. Quote, "If he, Bill Willingham, has reported this to the police and has a case number, it is not a joke. Stephanie Cook should already be trying to make restitution. Public sympathy will not keep you out of jail. I applaud Bill Willingham for this situation, and in turn, hopefully preventing others, for making the situation public, and hopefully preventing others from being victimized in the same way." Mimi Cruz, Night Flight Comics, September 22nd, 2015. Wow. Back to the article. I agree with Mimi Cruz and believe that Mr. Willingham has no motivation to lie. The local police were apparently notified with enough evidence to open a case and begin their investigation. While verifying my story, our editor reached out to Bill Willingham himself and confirmed that the criminal case filed in Dodge County, Minnesota against Cook is indeed still active, and Willingham also offered the following comments this week. Wow. I don't know if she ever retained counsel. She threatened to, and at the time I hoped she would try to sue since the evidence against her was overwhelming. No new evidence has come to light unless you count my continuing to go through more old bank records to see how wide-ranging her thieving went. That's terrible. Forensic accounting may be the most tedious of all jobs, and I pretty much had to do it all on my own. So then, not only has Miss Cook gotten away with it, unless she does something incredibly stupid before the statute of limitation expires, she's cost me hundreds of hours of dull labor piecing together the extent of her crimes. Yeah, that's probably the worst part of all. Out of sheer embarrassment, I almost stayed quiet about what she did as far as telling the comic community about her, because I really did make it ridiculously easy for her in almost any way imaginable. It was when she started advertising her services around as a potential personal assistant to other comic book pros that I thought I had some sort of responsibility to speak up. I did that then and again now. People in our business have been duly warned, and I hope I can go back to banishing Stephanie Cook from my thoughts. So a living legend in the comics business accuses his employee of felony theft and makes very public statements about it that were published in the media. Multiple sources back up his claims, and a criminal case was started. One might imagine no one could survive such a public mess. Stephanie's career in comics must certainly in peril now that the comics press had gotten a hold of this incredible story. But here's the thing. Comics media either ignored or outright censored the story. The whole story. In fact, while CBR, Newsarama, Comics Alliance, and The Beat, all big comics media websites, all were completely silent on the matter, the only high-profile comic news website that apparently covered the story was none other than Bleeding Cool. BleedingCool.com. As you can see in the screenshot from Night Flight Comics I shared above, Mimi Cruz linked directly to the following Bleeding Cool article on her official blog on September 22nd, 2015. Could Bleeding Cool be the only media outlet that gave any attention or credibility to the story? On September 21st, 2015, the story was ranked as the 11th most popular news item on Bleeding Cool, right behind 3 stories attacking artist Frank Cho. There it is, the 11th biggest story. All right. But something strange happens when you click on that particular story link. It takes you straight to a blank page. I clicked on it. Oops, page can't be found. That is odd. All right. It's worth noting that every other link on this top 20 traffic of the week page still works perfectly. So for some reason, the Stephanie Cook story is not there anymore. That's odd. Why would the only deleted article in that list be the one where Stephanie Cook was credibly accused of embezzlement by Fable's creator Bill Willingham? Why has it been scrubbed from the site after being such a hot news story? After all, if it bleeds, it leads, is the general perception of what gets reported at Bleeding Cool. And head writer Rich Johnson is considered by many to be a media shark. Once he sees red, he attacks anything that moves, ripping apart any pro in his path. But I must admit that he does seem to have a strange penchant for showing mercy whenever Whisper Network comrades are concerned. So apparently, the author here is saying that Rich Johnson doesn't, he protects anyone in the Whisper Network. Sharp-eyed readers may have noticed that Alex DeCampi's name appears on the same page as a Cook story where DeCampi, and I can't make this stuff up, is accusing a bunch of comic industry pros of sexual misconduct without evidence. Yep, there's her name. Because that was 11, and this is 14. I encourage you to take the time to click all the links I'm providing. I especially don't want anyone to miss how Rich Johnson ended that DeCampi article. You might be forgiven for thinking that Bleeding Cool is DeCampi's personal website or PR firm after reading this. Let what he wrote sink in for a moment. Quote, if you're smart, you employ her. If you're even smarter, you listen to what she says. Oh boy. That's ridiculous. Simping ain't easy, but it's necessary. Due diligence. In fairness to Stephanie Cook, she did proclaim her innocence on Twitter, and she's also claimed she was getting a lawyer when the alleged embezzlement in Minnesota came to light. But afterwards, she swiftly fled the United States and returned to Canada. That is cheaper than getting a lawyer. Was that to avoid facing charges or answering to the legal system through her lawyer that she claimed to have hired, or was she just feeling homesick? According to my sources, she never hired anyone, and she deleted any and all of her tweets where she claimed she was hiring one. As of today, according to all parties I spoke with, this remains an open embezzlement case, and she has not hired an attorney. And in Minnesota, embezzlement of this magnitude is punishable by up to 10 years in prison and or fines of $20,000. Embezzlement is very serious. Taking money that's someone else's is very serious in every state. Doesn't sound like they like it that much in Minnesota. According to Bill Willingham's 2015 statement from his original open letter, which of course this links to, which Bleeding Cool wiped from their website, she could still be charged with embezzlement should she return to the USA. While I don't have the dollar amount of the alleged embezzlement, Willingham alluded to it being in excess of $10,000. If Cook were to be convicted of a felony for less than $10,000, it could still land her in prison for up to 5 years in the state of Minnesota. That might motivate someone to lay low, not mention the incident anymore, and just wait out the statute of limitations. If only there was someone who owned a small law firm in central Minnesota who could law-splain this situation to us. I think he's referring to a fancy, famous YouTuber. We will see. On the subject of transparency, Comics Beat, the workplace of Cook's fellow Whisper Network comrade Heidi McDonald, published an interview with Cook back in 2018 where she wanted everyone to know that she's a big fan of transparency. Quote, there are a lot of problems in the comic book industry, as anyone who's been in it for a while can tell you. I think some of those problems could be solved with transparency, Stephanie Cook says. Oh, yes. I found it interesting that Cook only seems to talk about transparency as it applies to the men in the comics industry, but not herself or her female comrades. Strange that there was no mention of those embezzlement charges Mr. Willingham lobbied against Cook in that article. Or lobbed against Cook in that article. For that matter, there's no mention of it anywhere in the Comics Beat website, save one lone commenter with a good memory and an inquisitive mind who at least asked about it in the comments section of the transparency interview. From somebody named Gavin, whatever happened to the accusations that she embezzled money from Bill Willingham? Was that ever resolved? Yeah, comments are closed. Comments are certainly closed on that subject. 9 months earlier, Heidi McDonald herself had posted that Comics Pro, Comics Professional Retail Organization, was investigating misappropriation of organization funds by co-founder Gary Dills, so embezzlement stories were fair game then. What changed? Other comic websites also carry the Dills story, but when I looked around for the Stephanie Cook story, it's just not there. Certainly not at comicsbeat.com or anywhere else, apparently. Maybe inside the Whisper Network, beneficial friends can help those pesky problems disappear. Oh, wow. Comicsbeat.com, Willingham Cook. Yep, is an example of a search. As far as I can tell, the only time Cook ever responded to these accusations was on Twitter, which she later deleted. Here are two screen caps of tweets wherein it looks like Cook posted a response to Willingham's accusations in 2015. the fact that he would accuse me in public, of such incredibly shitty things on my effing birthday is unbelievable. On your birthday? Birthday does not give you immunity, I think. He never provided me with a chance to defend myself and automatically decided that I was guilty. Well, the money was missing. So what was he supposed to do? He's not talking about a situation he's unfamiliar with. He has the facts. The money's missing. According to these that's my take. According to these tweets, public accusations are shitty, and not letting people defend themselves first before going public is also bad. In contrast, here are a few more of Stephanie's undeleted tweets regarding instructions on how to handle money, with some more jabs at men for good measure. Weird how the first two almost on the anniversary of Willingham charging her with the embezzlement. Okay. Almost on the anniversary. Be realistic about this industry to other creators, because finding a home for your projects is hard, and finding work consistently enough to pay the bills is even harder. Oh, tight with the money. It should come as no surprise to anyone that all the people telling me that I'm wrong about making money in comics are men. Okay. Stop giving your money to shitty people when there are plenty of others who will gladly take your support. Okay. The irony's off the charts. But this is not a joke. Whisper Network members have been laughing at reports that came out in recent weeks about their group, making light of what was reported or threatening legal reprisals. But this is actually far from funny. Stephanie Cook is writing books for HMH Kids. She organizes comic events. She's considered to be a trusted member of the media, which means she has the privilege of reporting and handling sensitive information. She is supposed to be helping hook up creators with paying gigs, and yet she's never answered for criminal charges that were leveled at her by her previous employer, an award-winning, highly respected creator in the comic book industry. Yeah, something isn't right there. Doesn't sound good. How many in the Whisper Network had even heard of or knew about this alleged embezzlement beforehand, but kept quiet? CBR has published literally hundreds of Bill Willingham-related stories, but we're mum on this one. How many people knew about the subsequent media cover-ups, or perhaps even helped facilitate them? How many people in the industry have been victimized due to silence, something that Bill Willingham, Mimi Cruz, and others attempted to protect their peers from? No, I am sorry, Amy Chu, but this is not sharing cat pictures. This is not sharing cat pictures, and this is not a joke. This is dead serious. A lot of folks have things to answer for. Meanwhile, let's take a detour from memory lane and now look at some more recent history, maybe even peek into the future a bit. And this is a picture of odds for next week's phony Celebrity Comics Gate denouncement. Okay. Phony denouncements. Okay. The Whisper Network's next likely target. There's a tactic known as playing the long game, where the opposition builds their attacks in intensity slowly over time. Sort of a death by 1,000 cuts approach before the final blow, and then the real Twitter trial begins. On the this is such maniacs. On the social platforms, I've observed this pattern in the same handful of folks who frequently talk about taking down shitty people, the worst of the worst, but only the folks who they allege attacked marginalized groups and participate in, quote, hate groups. You know who they say they hate? Those right-wingers, the Gators, Trumpsters, ad infinitum. However, I'm convinced that this group, several members of it, are targeting anyone with power, regardless of their politics or affiliations. Potentially a target might be anyone they're jealous of, or anyone who has a job they feel entitled to. Yeah, this is abuse of power. That's what they're doing. I've also noticed that nearly all the targets seem to be men. The First Cut, Heather Antos, formerly of Marvel Comics, recently doled out a kick to the shins to Scott Snyder at DC Comics. Really? It happened on August 28th, 2018. Does that date sound familiar? Let's see. This was several months after she left Marvel Comics, and was certainly not fired from Marvel for anything that amounted to bullying, harassment, rumors spreading, and trying to damage the careers of her co-workers, as had been speculated. She left the company voluntarily to become editor-in-chief of esports betting website Unikrn on March 9th, 2018, and as reliably as ever, Rich Johnson gave her a wonderful send-off on Bleeding Cool. She expected more from Scott Snyder. Just a lot of expectations, apparently. Antos makes what seems like a subtle jab that implies you're not condemning Comicsgate quick enough for my taste, Scott, so that must mean you're tactically supporting them or tacitly supporting them, or am I reading that wrong? Someone saw in her tweet simply Antos being Antos, taking a cheap shot whenever she sees an opening, and was therefore really noting a nothing out of the ordinary. But was it really a random dig, or was this the beginning of something bigger? The first cut. Heather Antos, formerly of Marvel Comics, recently doled out a kick to the shins to Scott Snyder of DC Comics. It happened on August 28th, 2018. Does that date sound familiar? This was several months after she left Marvel Comics and was certainly not fired from Marvel for anything that amounted to bullying, harassment, rumor spreading, and trying to damage the careers of her co-workers, as had been speculated. She left the company voluntarily to become the editor-in-chief of esports betting website Unikim on March 9th, 2018. And as reliably as ever, Rich Johnson gave her a wonderful send-off on Bleeding Cool. Scott Snyder said, I was off radar with this being the kids last week before school starts and missed this yesterday, but of course this. So he's saying, of course, all right, comics are for everyone, etc., etc. Okay, so Heather Antos said, I'm disappointed. I expect more from you, Scott. Okay, so what was that? Antos makes what seems like a subtle jab that implies you're not condemning Comicsgate quick enough for my taste, Scott, so that must mean you're tacitly supporting them. Or am I reading that wrong? Some saw her tweet as simply Antos being Antos, taking a cheap shot whenever she sees an opening, and was therefore really nothing out of the ordinary. But was it really a random dig, or was this the beginning of something bigger? Comicsgate has been labeled a hate movement by certain self-proclaimed social justice warriors and far-left activists on Twitter. Heather Antos included. However, Comicsgate supporters and the industry pros who are either sympathetic or identify with the movement have always denied these allegations, claiming they are inclusive and they treat everyone equally, love comic books, judge work by its merit, and simply don't like a lot of what they see in the current direction of the comic book industry. And yet, for some reason, Scott Snyder has been compelled to repeatedly denounce the movement on social media. That is weird. The October surprise. The Whisper Network was really tearing things up going throughout 2017, making crazy comments and trashing pros publicly and privately. But things began to shift in late 2017 after Aubrey Sitterson's G.I. Joe comic was canceled by IDW for low sales. At least that's what was reported. But his critical statement about 9/11 mourners probably didn't sit well with G.I. Joe customers, especially since he crassly decided to his provocative comments on the anniversary. He crassly decided to make his comments on the anniversary, September 11th, 2017. Yeah, that is not the day to start making criticisms. This did little to quiet the extreme fringe left, but it planted a seed. Normal comic book fans in the middle, on the right, and even many on the left were growing sick of the sense of hatred towards readers and the heavy-handed politics that writers were regularly inserting in comics. They just wanted to be entertained, not scolded. Then October rolled around, October 12th, 2018. Marvel writer Chuck Wendig was fired, in his own words, because of negativity and vulgarity that my tweets bring. That's enough reason. It was too much politics, too much vulgarity, too much negativity on my part. Then on October 25th, 2018, comic book professional Mark Waid of Kingdom Come started a GoFundMe to pay for a lawsuit. He was accused of torturous interference and defamation by indie comic creator Richard Meyer, who started a GoFundMe on his own. Actually, that was started by Ethan Van Sciver, if memory serves, and it's been hugely successful. It's great of Ethan to do that. As of this time, Meyer's campaign had raised $145,000, while Wade's had only raised $81,000. With all of this sturm and drag, I surprisingly found nothing happening in the Whisper Network after October 2018. Interesting. For the rest of the year and for nearly all of 2019, the Twitterati seemed to be on their best behavior. They even stopped much of the trash talking and presumably colluding behind the scenes, from what I could tell. Yeah, that would make sense. A nice lawsuit will calm people down, make them behave themselves. I could find no threats, no bullying, and the rumor spreading had really died down. It remained relatively quiet until 2020. Dateline 2020, the attacks resume on Snyder. One thing I've come to believe about the Whisper Network, they never forgive and they never forget. Even the tiniest cut will leave a trail of blood for them. On January 14th, 2020, it was none other than Stephanie Cook who took the next swipe at Snyder. It is probably too soft to be considered a cancellation, but that probably wasn't the point. I believe it was designed to build a foundation for future attacks, thereby demeaning him and calling his character into question. What a creep. Stephanie Cook. Please stop pitting creators against each other. Nothing good comes from that mentality. We're all peers. We're all in this thing together. If you're not in comics to also help lift up your peers, then maybe comics isn't for you. Okay. Comic scribe Scott Snyder isn't scared to train his competition. Yet, okay, we're supposed to have competition. Also, everyone in the writer's workshop never got hired for more than fill-in work. Okay. Maybe comics isn't for you, Scott Snyder. Yeah, who does she think she is? Followed up breathlessly by verified Twitter user and proud Whisper Network ally Christopher Sabella also got in a tiny job when Scott was being put down. I don't think this attack went very well for Cook because it didn't go viral and it didn't get any traction. A few more months passed before the network lashed out again. I've noticed another pattern seems to be that they bring up the same petty grievances over and over again for years if necessary until it goes viral and or the media decides to report on it. June 25th, we witnessed Alex the Campy saying she doesn't believe that Snyder would say no to abusing, harassing, grooming, and manipulating women. She doesn't believe. Insinuating that he wouldn't intervene if he saw some women being abused. Again, she gave no evidence. That's a disgusting thing to say. Again, she gave no evidence to back up her insinuation that Mr. Snyder had ever sexually abused, harassed, or marginalized anyone, and yet, without cause, she publicly let Snyder's peers, editors, friends, followers, co-workers, and even his wife know that she thought Scott was capable of any of these horrific offenses whenever she shared it with her 24,000 Twitter followers. I'm sure they'd appreciate her opinions on the matter. This is cute, but we don't believe you. It goes way beyond this to things like speaking up and using your privilege to push change. What monstrous people these are. It goes to refusing work with a publisher that continues to employ known harassers. It goes to saying no to all white male panels? What? Or guesting at cons with no or only token numbers of marginalized creators as guests. It's all very nice to say pretty words of support and bless, but will you actually risk your comfort to dismantle this system? Dismantle what system? You have to succeed based on your merit, young lady. Stop trying to corrupt and control and coerce. Would Scott Snyder be accepting of abuse towards women and harassment in the workplace? Or is she saying that Snyder is somewhat of a sexist and a racist because he's not dismantling the DC comic system under which he is employed? Or is she simply bitter that his employer has only ever hired her to write one comic and then never employed her again? She certainly seems to be a prolific writer on Twitter, though. Maybe that's why Alex's de facto PR department gleefully turned to her Twitter tantrum into a news story, because of course they did. So this is Bleeding Cool turning her stupid comments into a news story. Oh boy. Here we see Stephanie Cook attempting to stain Scott Snyder with a CG adjacent label, which has oddly become the equivalent of a scarlet letter, like calling someone... All right. I'm gonna have the link to this article. I'm gonna stop with this. This is a tremendous amount of depravity by very unhappy people. This is an excellent article. It's got excellent citations in it. I highly recommend you read it. But what I will say is these are people who don't seem to possess any decency. It's all just hate, coercion, greed, and destructiveness. including accusations of felony theft against Stephanie Cook that sound credible. I've heard good things about Bill Willingham. I don't know him. I've never worked with him, but I know people who do. And yeah, he's got a great reputation. So I don't know what these people are up to, except to say it looks really, really bizarre, inappropriate, and I don't want any freaking part of it. So I'm going to get you the link so you can get really a full read on all of this. What a fantastic article. Great job, Bleeding Fool. If you want to support my work, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and on collegeofthedead.com you can get a copy of College of the Dead Graduation Day, the comic book, where college costs you an arm and a leg. I made that up, but it's true. You can get eaten up by zombies. It's 48 pages. It's full color, and this is the second on an ongoing series. We're working on College of the Dead Spring Break right now. We will have that one out soon, but not just yet. Sooner will be The Mermaids, full color, epic mermaid fantasy, like Game of Thrones with mermaids. Full color, 48 pages. It is going to be launching soon. Make sure you get to epicmermaids.com. The link is in the description, so you can sign up and be notified when the book launches. I will see you again soon with another video, and if I don't see you, I will miss you.